Our topic is the state of road flows between Colombia and other countries, types and volumes. Our group comprises Cristian Ramírez, Paola Barreto, Julián Herrera, Francisco Luna y Diana Borges.
Flow of raw materials. These are the basic form of international trade because producing countries are not always large consumers of the raw materials extracted. If sold, the latter represent 40% of total exchanges in world trade. Transport, storage and distribution. The chain consists of all logistics operations ranging from procurement of raw materials to direct consumption by end customers, with ports playing a major role in generating a company's competitive advantage. Regardless of the operators involved in international trade, the following describes the process necessary to take a commodity from origin to final destination. 1. Export company or factory. The company exports from the country of origin, acquires raw materials, and using its technological infrastructure, fabricates products for export, usually by using a customs broker who carries out export procedures at the port or border of the country to which it exports. 2. Transport. In most countries, road transport is the most common way to take products to ports and distribute them throughout the territory. Most developing regions are connected by a port and road network. From the standpoint of cost, ton per kilometer, air is the most expensive form of transport, followed by rail, then water, and finally road. The transport function is responsible for all activities related directly or indirectly to the need to move products to the relevant destinations, taking into account safety, service, and cost. 3. Ports. Ports have evolved over the years into major logistics hubs. The new approach of port services and management, focused on customer service and quality, has created the modern port, which goes beyond its traditional function and is now configured as an instrument in the service of foreign trade, a distribution and storage center offering logistics services to the entire value chain of international logistics operators. Conclusion. When goods arrive by sea to the port of the importing country, the same logistical operations are necessary as at the port of the exporting country, but in reverse, meaning that the ship is discharged by means of ship cranes, gantry cranes, land cranes, or pipes, depending on whether the cargo is general cargo, bulk solid, bulk coal, liquid bulk, or containers, or whether it's carried to the port storage facilities. Here, after respective customs procedures, the cargo is carried by land, either by rail or road, to the logistics platforms, warehouses, or the import or manufacturing company, which distributes it to end users, typically using the same modes of transport used for transportation in the country of origin or export. Theoretical support. According to data from the report by Pro Export Exports, from September 2010, the total value of Colombia's exports were $28.92 billion, which is the second largest over the same period in the country's history, the best being in 2008. Export sales grew 21.2% and volume increased 10.8% on the previous year. Of note were sales of petroleum and its derivatives, which accounted for 40.7% of all Colombian exports. Main export destinations. Pro Export indicates that the United States continued to be the main destination for Colombian exports, accounting for 42.2% of total sales, which amounts to $12.2 billion, up more than 5 points in the first 9 months of 2009. The second most important destination was the European Union, which represented 12.3% of total exports. Andean countries came next, accounting for $2.2 billion, or 7.7% of total exports. Ecuador was the main partner and represented 47.2% of those exports, while exports to Peru and Bolivia grew by 45.8% and 16% respectively. China was another important destination for Colombian exports, accounting for 5.9% of the total, or $1.67 billion, which amounts to a growth of 224%, with sales of coal, petroleum, and its derivatives being the main factors. Finally, the last of the 4 main export partners was Venezuela, which accounted for $1.1 billion. Diagnosis of the problem. Colombian exports are subject to numerous problems: volatility in the exchange rate, especially down, volatility in commodity prices, lower global demand,
foreign competition, and diplomatic crises with its neighbors. But amid the ups and downs between 2005 and 2008, Colombia registered sustained growth of its sales abroad. This is because the country made up for losses in one domain with gains in another. In the aforementioned period, exports grew by 77.5%, from $21.2 billion at the end of 2005 to $37.6 billion last year, the highest figure in the country's history. The sector became the driving force of the Colombian economy at a time when a general slowdown was already in evidence elsewhere. However, the wind changed in 2009, as the only favorable factor in the first half of this year was a slight recovery in the exchange rate. This lasted only until March, and in general that particular year was characterized by a whole host of negative factors, both external and internal. The result was obvious. Exports fell 25.3% in June alone, and according to figures from DANE, the cumulative decline in the first half of the year came to 18.8%. For some, the fall was expected, and this phenomenon was not just exclusive to Colombia, but observed throughout the world, including major exporters like China, minus 21.4%, Brazil, minus 22.2%, and Chile, minus 38.1%. Problems with imports. The import process in Colombia suffers because of faulty control mechanisms both internally and with the entities involved in the process. There are also big problems related to the handling of documents required in the import process. Among the problems identified were the lack of approved, standardized procedures for the generation of clearances in each of the entities that generate authorizations, the lack of control over the implementation of tasks and activities to be carried out internally by the Ministry of Commerce, or forms to let the latter control the activities related to foreign trade entity clearances involved in the process. Importers becoming messengers of the state, requiring clearances in each of the existing entities. The need for importers to queue in banks to make payments for foreign trade procedures. The problems of forgery and falsification of documents for import licenses and authorizations, allowing entry into the country of prohibited items. A high level of corruption with service providers, brokers, and state officials involved in the approval process of import licensing. Large costs in terms of time and money for importers to acquire pre-printed stationery import records, costs in the process of printing and mailing of paper documents to the Ministry of Commerce. A lack of performance indicators or information that would allow the ministry to know the time required to complete the process, or warning mechanisms and scalings letting them know when a trade deal took too long to be processed. Cost to the Ministry of Commerce of processing physical documents, including establishing a physical window, the internal distribution of documents, capturing the information on internal systems, processes, scanning, microfilming processes, and cost of physical filing in general. Low levels of efficiency and productivity. It is necessary to acquire a technological tool that allows the Ministry of Commerce to control procedures related to trade. It would automate the processing of trade integration into a single system accessible to all internal staff involved in trade processes, as well as all entities that generate authorizations and all importers. Problems of logistics in Colombia. Despite progress in the last 2 years, Colombia is still split in terms of its logistics performance. In its report Connecting to Compete 2012, Trade Logistics in the Global Economy, the World Bank gave Colombia a rating of 2.87 out of 5 in its Logistics Performance Index. The index assesses issues such as process efficiency of clearance of goods, infrastructure for trade, logistics service quality, traceability, and compliance with shipment times and deliveries. Comparatively, the country ranks 64th among 155 nations. In the last issue of this study, conducted in 2010, it was ranked 72nd with a score of 2.77. The ranking is led by Singapore, Hong Kong, Finland, Germany, and Holland. In Latin America, the best performers are Chile, which is ranked 39th, followed by Brazil, 35th, and Mexico at 47. Colombia's lowest score was in customs, 2.65. The aspect that was worse was located in tracking and tracing, where it was placed 85th with a score of 2.66. On the other hand, it got a score of 2.72 in infrastructure, which placed it 68th. For international shipments, the country ranked 78th with a score of 2.76. Colombia was better ranked for the quality of its logistics, reaching 52nd, but still only failed with a score of 2.95.
The only aspect which it passed was the time to export and import, getting a rating of 3.45, a score that ranked it 57th out of 155 countries. Priorities for low-income countries. According to the World Bank report, trade facilitation has gained ground in the public agenda and the private sector. The agency says that trade facilitation is crucial for economic development. Countries with better logistics can grow faster, be more competitive and increase investment. Better logistics performance can boost trade in low and middle income countries by up to 15%.